Hello, Investigator T. A huge welcome back and thank you again for taking time out to have a chat. It's very much appreciated.
Oh, you're most welcome. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, great. Sorry, it's been a while. I did have to step back for a few weeks between real life and work, and I needed to take a breather, but it's definitely good to be back and diving back into the case with you.
Cool.
So before we start, I just want to let everyone know where we're at and what we'll be discussing tonight, and that is Kuss Road. The reason why I wanted to go there before we hit on the bones and the rest of the evidence used in trial to prosecute Stephen Avery is because I wanted to stop for a minute and twist things up and kind of work from the inside out and use, your expertise in it as well. Instead of discussing the evidence found first, I thought it would be good to introduce Kuss Road and their significance, if there is any to this case, and then, go forward with the rest of the evidence, just so it might help with the jigsaw puzzle coming together a lot easier for you later as well. With Kathleen right now in her own narrative in the brief she submitted to the Court of Appeals, she's building her primary crime location around Kuss Road. So I just want to ask you a few questions from a law enforcement point of view if you too find Kuss Road could be a possible crime scene. Yeah. So I have sent you everything we have found in relation to Kuss Road, which wasn't truly much on the documentation side of things, but I definitely wanted to provide you with all those pictures of the location that they had taped off and had it looking more authentic than Stephen Avery's. There seemed to be a lot more physical activity going on at Kuss than we did see at Stephen's. So if you're ready, we'll get started on question 1.
Yeah, far away.
Okay, so question 1. Have you ever been involved in a missing person case where dogs are used to track or locate a specific person or item, but then denied to do a job that they were sent to? For example, basing it off this case, a dog has sent it to a location. Once there, they've almost been stood down and they can't go any further.
Not for a missing person per se. Most of my experience that I've had with police dogs has been either general purpose dogs, like German Shepherds or drug dogs, Labradors and that sort of thing. When we use, if you want to relate, I suppose, a missing person to someone who we're looking for, like a burglar or a car thief or something like that, they could be deemed to be missing because you don't know where they are. We use them to track their path or to give us like a place or a location to search. So once they've tracked to a certain place, or they're given an indication on where the dog thinks this person may be, we hold the dogs there. Because if they go and they can contaminate the scene, depending on the type of person that we're following, sometimes we just let the dogs in because it's necessary to get them out of a bush or whatever. But generally, we'll hold them at a door. If they've run into a house, we'll hold them at a door and then searchers can go in. I imagine in this case, though, once the tracker dogs tracked to the scene where Teresa was alleged to, there was an alleged scene in Kuss Road, they would have stopped the dog at the cordon point and not let the dog go any further because by the sounds of it, that scene had already been established, so there wouldn't have been any need to use the dog to confirm that that's where they should be looking. So I would have been surprised if they let the dog in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for mine, there's no real need to... Well, I think you said that the scene had already been established before the dog had tracked there, so there's no point letting the dog in to muddle things up and possibly contaminate the scene when it's already been established.
Yeah.
It just been used to confirm that the track that Teresa or something that smelled like Teresa had followed to get to that point. Once it got to the point where the scene had already been established and there was a cordon there, they would have stopped the dog at the cordon and not let the dog go any further. It was just would have been confirmatory more than used to track or search or locate her remains.
Well, that's awesome to hear, because I've always assumed that there was a bit of a sinister motive of not letting dogs go further into the crime scene or the
Yeah.
alleged crime scene. So to hear that, you know, the fact that they could have stopped them for, you know, not trying to contaminate any more of the scene, or they've already established it, makes kind of sense. So that's really useful. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Question 2. Have you ever heard of an ambulance being used for any reason in a homicide or missing persons case, having one on standby at a location?
Not for a homicide. The fact that they had an ambulance standing by might have suggested that they thought they could find Teresa alive, but as most of all the viewers would know, ambulances are only used to transport people who are still alive.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. As soon as they found Teresa or remains of what they thought was Teresa, the ambulance should have actually been stood down because it could be needed elsewhere, you know, for other emergencies for people that needed an ambulance.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, the only other point I was going to raise with the ambulance thing was police officers can confirm a life extinct if they find remains of a body or a person that is obviously dead. The only time an ambulance officer would be allowed into the scene would be to certify that someone was dead. By the sounds of it, they didn't find a body where they would suggest that she was still alive, or even if there was a body that person was still alive at all. And if they did, let the ambulance into the scene or the ambulance officers into the scene. Just trying to read up here.
Yeah. I remember what you're saying, because you said that if they had found the like a torso, there would be documentation from the ambulance as well to say that they had removed the body and had, you know, declared the body of Teresa to be deceased, blah, blah, blah. So I remember you saying that to me. So that's kind of goes hand in hand with going back to your original thing with the why an ambulance would be there, which makes sense. At that stage, she was only a missing person. If she had been found just injured and alive but hurt but needing medical assistance immediately, they had that on standby. So at face value, they did do the right thing in case she was alive and just injured.
Yeah. From what you told me, there was no suggestion that there was a body there that was alive at all. So I don't know why. The ambulance may have been on standby just on the course of the job, but it wouldn't have been sent to Kuss Road for the sole purpose of being assigned to that job.
Mm-hmm.
It would have just been on a standby to turn up just in case there was any chance of that person being found alive. But there was obviously there's no body to even suggest that the person was still alive. So I don't know why the ambulance was kept on station. It seems odd.
It is odd. It is very odd. And with some of the logs we've found, Millbilly has been going through, there seems to be a few little interesting coming and going and disappearing acts. And
that was another thing you mentioned as well. With that ex-detective.
Yeah, had signed in but had disappeared.
That would never, ever, ever, ever happen, ever. There is no way in hell that a civilian would be in charge of a crime scene that important where a possible murder site or dump site had been found.
Oh, yeah, I remember you saying
the dog had already tracked to that site, so they knew it was of some significance. It had been cordoned off already.
Mm-hmm.
But for a civilian to be left in charge of the integrity of the cordon is just
insane.
I can't even compute that. It's regardless if he's an ex-detective or not, it would have to be a sworn officer.
Yeah, it would have to be
and not just a sworn officer. It would be at least a detective, at the very least.
Yeah.
And then there would be logs and stuff, run by uniform staff that would log out all the comings and goings out of that perimeter. But to have a civilian run it that kind of blew me away.
Yeah, I know.
But that, for me, just makes anything they found there basically inadmissible, because you cannot testify to the veracity of whatever they've found.
Absolutely. So, question 3, what do you believe they found there?
It's hard to say. There wasn't much to go on. I don't know. I have no idea. I couldn't comment on that, except it could be anything. It could be the dump site. Her body could have been left there. A decomposing body leaves sign for a long time, especially scent. It could have been clothing. It could have been blood. She could have been killed there and moved. But yeah, it's hard to say without.
Definitely, that's a very hard question. I ask it because I just want to cover all my bases, but I agree. Yeah. It's open interpretation for what was found at Kuss Road, because there was no documentation. They took all their resources down there and only to turn around and go, "There's nothing to see here." I just wanted to see whether you had an idea.
I don't think that's quite correct, because Luke tracked to that site. There was obviously something there that they were interested in, but for them to say that there was nothing there when the dog tracked there, I find that very hard to believe, and that doesn't add up either.
Yeah, absolutely. So, question 4, after everything you have seen and looked at regarding Kuss Road, explain to the viewers, what did you observe about it being a possible crime scene?
All right. I'll read from my notes here. As a possible crime scene, I found it utterly mind-blowing the way that it was run. Civilians should not be in charge of the integrity of the perimeter. Ambulances and civilians should not be coming and going at will. I found the log sheets were not being completed properly, i.e. People coming and going that weren't logged. Movements in and out of the scene that weren't logged. A possible contaminated item, I think you mentioned the shovel.
Yep, the shovel, yep.
Being brought to the scene was, again, I'm speechless at the way that it was run. As a crime scene, it's hard to say, because just going on what you told me, my opinion would be they found something there, and that would seem to be confirmed by the dog tracking there.
Yep.
And then for them to say that there was nothing there, that it was just a false alarm, basically, I don't buy that either.
Yeah, I agree with you. There was something had either been there or, in my opinion, from what I believe, something had been there.
Yeah.
And they had discovered that she had been there, or something had been dumped there that had been outside of the aviaries. So they realised, oh shit, we need to get rid of this now, because it affects our narrative and our tunnel vision that it was Stephen when we've got all her stuff out here.
Well, they could have found something that they relocated, and they didn't want that item to be located or found or logged or noticed before they wanted it to be found in the place where they want it to be found.
Absolutely, which I think we'll get to that at the very last one, which I'm going to kind of tie back in with you. So I agree with you on everything you said there about the being of the possible crime scene. What do you think about the way they taped it off and how they had all the activity? Do you think, as an officer who's gone to crime scenes, did that kind of fall in place with what you would see authentically if you were to conduct it?
Absolutely not. Like I said before, a civilian running a crime scene is unheard of.
Right.
Unheard of. 18 years in law enforcement, and I don't even have words for that.
Yeah.
I can't believe that I can only come up with theories as to why. Maybe it was because any sort of sworn officer involved would have a little more integrity into what they found there, and would testify to what they found, whereas a civilian
is not obligated as such.
wouldn't hold themselves to that same level of accountability.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It just seemed like the person the ex-detective that was left in charge of the scene was also linked to the other officers that were involved in Avery's first conviction.
Absolutely.
So it's such a conflict of interest. I can't fathom the fact that they left just a civilian. Effectively, someone off the side of the street pulled in and said, "Hey, run a crime scene for us."
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
It's just absolutely biggest belief.
It is. It really is. So I got the question 5. Millbilly has found the conversation that I sent you. It was a conversation online, a dispatch call where you can faintly hear someone say, "Teresa Hallbuck, west of Avery's." This dispatch call was on a different server, and Millbilly had stated that if it hadn't been changed over, you wouldn't have heard it at the time. Why would officers be using a secret channel to communicate? And would you even consider that a secret channel?
No, not really. It's not unusual for police to use separate channels. I know that we use separate channels even just in our local operations.
Right.
You'll have the main comms channel that the district uses.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a call sign assigned to that channel when you talk to comms. Just you run the more normal stuff. If you're running an operation where you don't want to tie up the radio waves, you will, at the start of the operation, give a radio channel to all the people involved at the briefing.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, it'll be like the main channel, district channel for district might be 1002. But then you can jump on to 2002 or 3002. It just depends. And then they normally have one person at least monitoring the main channel, because that's the main channel that the comms go through, and that's where you find all your radio traffic. But local talk is quite often done on just an operation-specific channel.
Absolutely. And I think you said to me before when you were taking notes, when I had sent you everything and you had touched back with me, and you said you had outlined that if they were doing sinister secret channels, you'd expect them more to use their mobile where nothing was recorded, period. That kind of closes the window of being caught doing anything sneaky.
That point was interesting as well, because in the murder investigations that I've been involved with, all communications are logged.
Right.
Like telephone calls and that sort of thing, they'll be written down in a detective's notebook. Say, for example, like today's date, 9th of September. 9th September, phone call at 8:20 to Kelly, stating blah, 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 blah. It won't be in much detail, but the log of the call will be there, and they have to be disclosed to the defence.
Right.
So if they're making phone calls amongst themselves, it doesn't have to hold up to utter scrutiny, but it has to be logged in some way, even if it's just phone call to party A.
Right.
It doesn't even say what it's about, just say phone call to party A. Or phone call to forensics, advise them of this, or phone call to main station asking for meals to be delivered, or something like that. It would be logged somewhere in your notebook, and that should be disclosed to the defence. But as far as I'm aware, there were no notes.
No, they kept everything pretty much not documented for reasons, I think, for just, like you said before, when we went back all the way to the Andy Colburn and how he didn't have much documentation when he was in on everything, and he'd always write just a paragraph, and you were like, why is this guy in everything and he's limited to like a paragraph? That's just unbelievable in all his reports. Throughout this whole case, he doesn't seem to be the only officer or sheriff or detective that are limiting what they're saying. And I think that's going back to the whole try not to commit to anything on paper, because once you commit, you have to follow it through. And I think that's where they kind of stick to, like, not committing to anything that they find,
Yeah,
discover. They're not locked into anything.
Yeah, you can't tie yourself into a narrative if you write stuff down.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you don't write stuff down, you can't tie yourself into a narrative. So when you get put on the stand, you can leave yourself some flexibility about how you answer the questions.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, yeah, not having notes is... The other thing that I found surprising just on the note side was a murder investigation or like even a missing persons investigation where, like, it was clear at the stage where it was, getting to a week old, where they found the vehicle and all that sort of thing, there would be operations orders signifying like radio channels and duties and call signs assigned to door knocks and that sort of thing. It just looked like it was quite, like it was just thrown together. There was no structure to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that allowed a lot of manipulation to go on once they'd found things, and that side of being able to manipulate the narrative, manipulate the evidence that they found.
Oh, that's for sure. Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more there. Question 6. Do you think Kuss Road could have been a diversion / smokes and mirror to hide the real shenanigans going on in the background, like getting more people off and away from Stevens to do more plantings, like planting of evidence at that location?
No, I don't. Basically, in short, no, I don't think it was a diversion.
Cool.
Because the dog tracked to that location.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't fool a bloodhound. You just doesn't work that way.
I'm so glad you said that. But could you trick one? Could you maybe,
Yeah, of course you can. You can. Of course, it's common to. It's common to lay a trail for a dog.
Right.
I mean, that's what crims do when they try and avoid us. They'll jump over fences and they'll lead us through streams and that sort of thing. So it's common knowledge you can trick a tracking dog, but yeah, I don't think that was the case in this.
No, I don't think so either. Here's a really interesting one. So I'm going to try to word it so it makes sense, but it's question 7. In law enforcement terminology, what would you call a torso? I ask this because Bushman refers to finding like a stump. Do you think that could be a code for a body part, or do you think it was just an easier way for him saying we found a rotted tree trunk in a location that has these kind of things? Have you ever heard of like an officer saying, hey, we have a trunk here and a stump or a trunk, and then going to it and then realizing it was a body part? Do you guys use different kind of terminology, or would you just refer it to as a body? Hey, we found a body part.
If you're asking to speculate on how they would call a body part, it's hard to guess because these guys are just so amateur. But
that's so
in
true.
my own experience, no, we would never call a torso a stump.
Yep. Okay.
It would be called a torso or partial remains.
Partial remains, right. So that would be, if you're in a law enforcement, how you'd context it.
You can't call a stump because it's so vague. It could be anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why a lot of people have speculated that possibly for that reason a stump could be interpreted as a stump in a body part, a stump as in a tree trunk, anything. It's open to, well, what is it?
I would hazard a guess in this case that stump would have been a reference to a body part of some sort. Because you just wouldn't refer to a rotting tree.
Because that's what he references it to. But then eventually what they come out with is they said that what they found in that location was I'm going to say this, it was like a bag of manure kind of thing that had been buried, and they were like, there's nothing to see here. It was just like soil kind of thing, disturbed soil. And then, so really at the end of the day, they kind of closed it off with there was nothing to see here. We had spent time down here and there was nothing. It was just a false alarm. Again, we just wanted a lot of people have said, could they have used the terminology of stump to reference a code word for a torso? But like you said, there is, you'd call it a partial remains or a torso, but in this case, anything is possible.
Yeah, you wouldn't call, unless they were just being crass. You wouldn't refer to what you found there that set off so many false alarms as a stump.
Yeah.
A stump of what?
A stump of what? Yeah. Absolutely.
It doesn't make sense, and it's
odd. It's very
I don't know
odd.
whether they're being dismissive on purpose and just trying to downplay whatever they found, or whether they just that hillbilly that they just refer to things as stumps.
Yeah.
It's another thing that doesn't compute. It's not very professional. It's not descriptive.
It isn't. Is it a stump of a bone, perhaps? Like, is it bone? Is it, it, like you said, it opens for interpretation of what do they call a stump? Yeah,
and you would have to call into question any documentation that referred to what they found there as a stump. The fact that the dog tracked there for me would. Well, they may have done it as a diversion. I don't know, but if it was genuine and the dog tracked there, then whatever they found in there would have been documented, and they wouldn't have just referred to whatever they found as a stump and then closed it off.
Well, they closed
it. Doing their jobs properly.
Nothing to see here, they reckon.
Yeah. Just a stump.
Question 8. Have you ever heard of a detective coming out of retirement for one day to lead a search party?
It's not uncommon. I have heard of that before. However, their roles are strictly caveated to whatever their expertise is. They don't get management roles. They're more of a consultant type role. They don't get involved in physically manipulating or managing exhibits or scenes. They solely get brought in for their opinion evidence.
Right.
That's the only scenario that I've seen ex-detectives or sworn officers like forensics officers or crime scene officers be recalled, and is solely on their area of expertise. They do not ever take an active role in investigations. They just don't.
Yep. And so him coming in as he's the one that called up and goes, hey, listen, I'm going to offer my services. I'm going to come in and I'm going to help. I'm going to take search party A. I'm going to lead them, blah, blah, blah. That's in reference to you saying he's technically a civilian at this stage now. He has no right to kind of lead anything. Yeah. That's the civilian side of it, right?
Yeah, he can volunteer his services. Yeah. It's the same as anyone volunteering their services to assist in a search party. But once anything that's found that requires police attendance, their role ends. They don't get told, well, you found something. No, you can just act as the crime scene manager and, do whatever you like with it. As soon as their role, they're just civilians.
Right. That makes
sense. Same with a teacher or a truck driver or a cook. They wouldn't be given control of a crime scene, even if they were ex-detectives.
Yep. Okay, so final question, which is my bonus question. In your honest opinion as a law enforcement officer, if they had found a body or anything that could have been used to frame Stephen, really fucking him over and securing his guilt in, keeping in mind that they didn't have a narrative at this stage or any physical evidence of Teresa, do you believe they would have used it to their advantage and used her DNA or anything of her exhibits or anything to frame Stephen Avery's trailer?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, they've obviously gone to lengths to frame Stephen.
Yeah.
So anything that would be used to strengthen their case, they would have used.
Yeah.
If they, And I think I have a hunch that's what's happened in this case with the bones.
Yes, which I'm so glad you brought up, because when we end this tonight, when we come back, we'll hit the bones, because the bones in itself is such a complex part of the forensic evidence that was used against Stephen. So, yeah, I agree. That's really good that you brought up the bones in referencing that.
The fact that there was no physical, no body, no blood, nothing of Teresa's that was found. There's no physical evidence from Teresa's body that was found by the police. That was used in the prosecution would suggest to me that they didn't have it, which would then lead me to believe that the body may have indeed been burnt, which is where they got the bones from. The only evidence that they planted was Stephen's evidence in her vehicle.
Yeah. His blood.
And around that sort of space. They didn't have any physical blood or anything. They basically didn't have anything from Teresa. All they had were her possessions.
Absolutely.
And they put Stephen's DNA on the well, I think they have on Teresa's possessions, and they made it look like he was with her or had been in contact with her in some way. The fact that they didn't plant any physical items or physical body parts or any kind of DNA or evidence, forensic evidence from Teresa herself, blood, DNA, whatever, would suggest to me they didn't have it.
Absolutely.
The fact that they found the bones, which had been, would suggest that she'd been burnt, that would suggest to me that that's all they found, and I would not be surprised if they found the bones at Kuss Road and put them in the pit. Wow,
because I've definitely started sending you. You've been reviewing the bone stuff, so you've already kind of got an idea of where we're going with that, and you've been looking at the notes and the pictures that I've been sending. So you already started to go down that rabbit hole, and knowing that they found the bones in 3 to 4 different locations, so. Kuss Road, it's not even hard to believe that also could have been an area too that they found majority of the bones, being the fact that 60% of the body's still gone.
It was either the dump site or the kill site.
Fantastic. That is honestly music to my ears. And I just want to throw back quickly to question 7. That makes me always go back to the torso and being a stump, because I think and this is my opinion, I'm just trying to base it off like the way I try to keep it logical and all that, and ending it on your expertise and your idea of it. You said that if they had it, they would have used it. So it goes back to, if they had a torso, brackets, a stump, why wouldn't they have used that to their advantage? And I have had a lot of people go, well, you know what, they've already searched the property. They couldn't go back with the torso and then find it. I'm like, yeah, they could have. They went back to the trailer 7 times after not finding a key and then finding a magic key. They could definitely go back and then finding item FL, which was the bullet, which we will go down that road later. They definitely, that was part of their game plan. They would go back. They would change their narrative to suit that. So why wouldn't they have gone back to change the narrative that a body part was found now in his premises?
Even if they didn't physically plant the torso on Avery's property, there are other ways of using it.
Yeah,
getting blood DNA or tissue DNA off the stump. And putting it in Stephen's trailer. I mean, they would have swabbed Stephen's trailer for her DNA. It would have been prudent to do that. And any kind of biological DNA that they found from Teresa would be absolutely damning.
Absolutely. And I've always said that. I said, you know, it kind of goes back to, you know, if the cops had killed her, they would have done such a good job that it would have been so bulletproof, it would have been cleaner, it wouldn't have been this sloppy, the documentation would have had all their T's crossed and their I's dotted, and it would have been so cutthroat that even Stephen probably would have turned around and went, shit, maybe I did, because that's pretty damning against me right now. And it goes back to that. They used what they had, and from going on what we do know in their own narrative, they didn't seem to have a lot, especially not of her.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, that's a really good point. I don't think the cops did it because they have no motive. And if they did do it, it would have been watertight.
Yeah. Their motive was tight in the fact that they definitely had motive because they had a $36 million kind of lawsuit pending on them, and they also had the depositions that were hanging on their heads. But is it enough to kill an innocent woman? And why Teresa? A lot of people can make that jump and go, yeah, it is. And I can see that. I really can. But then it doesn't fit with how the crime scene played out and how this whole framing turned out. Yeah, it worked. No matter whether they were involved or not, it worked. Stephen is in jail. They got what they wanted. But to me, it would have been more cleaner. It wouldn't have been so sloppy. They wouldn't have left all these things, these little, I call them the Easter eggs, to be able to hunt and find. It would have been so tidied up that there wouldn't have been us asking these questions all these years later. And you wouldn't have a documentary questioning it because it would have been just so straightforward. Yeah.
I mean, it's so sloppy. It's so sloppy. They wouldn't have had... They had to make up the narrative themselves. With what was dictated to them in the circumstances. They didn't have the chance to set everything up, perfect scenarios and that sort of thing. So
and then it went into almost like a tunnel vision. They didn't want it to be Stephen. They needed it to be Stephen to end the lawsuit, to end the depositions. That was their part in this. In my opinion, a lot of people think they could have been law enforcement, and I respect that, and I can see why, but I just think that's, again, it just logically, you have to clean it up, and it just makes no sense to me. And that's why it's great talking to you, because from a law enforcement point of view, you give us all that. Like, I remember the very first time I brought this case to you, and I was in this case, and I would talk to you about and give you little like ideas of why I did it and what I do and stuff. And I remember asking you once, like, how would you do it? You're a law enforcement. How would you do it? And your exact words to me was, and you made it so simple. You said, all you need to do is you need to take a truth and you need to just put someone in it. And it's as simple as grabbing Stephen and putting him in her car. Bang, you're done. It's simple, it's clean, and it's over. So why not? Why would it have to be this elaborate setup that makes no sense? It just doesn't work.
Yeah, I've never got it. I've never understood. I don't know how they twisted how they managed to get what actually happened and twist it in front of the judge to make it fit their desired narrative. I don't know how they got it through court.
I know that's one thing you always, and throughout this whole process, that we keep in touch. And when I'm sending you stuff, you'll send things to me. And most of the questions I get from you, or the statements I get from you, is, I cannot believe this even made it to court. How did this pass? Like in Australia, you said half these things would be admissible. You wouldn't even see it.
We got guilty people caught on camera doing stuff that get found not guilty. This is just ludicrous.
I know. Well,
the standard, I don't know. Again, it's hard to compare apples to oranges, but
absolutely,
even just basic common sense would dictate that there's something just doesn't add up.
Well, yeah, that was pretty much the Kuss Road discussion. Thank you so much again. I think now that we've hit the bones, we'll kick back off with that in the next few days and get that going. If you're free, we'll discuss that and we'll set up a time and we'll get that sorted. Thank you so much again. Honestly, it helps so much. Everyone, it kind of keeps with the case being in limbo at the moment, waiting for the courts to make a decision. It's keeps everything alive. It gets people talking again, and that's what we want with this case, is just everyone to keep talking, which there's a lot of supporters out there that are so dedicated that it's alive, that keeps the case alive. It's great. So thank you again. It's been great.
You're welcome, Kelly. You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.